Do you want to learn how to add beautiful passing chords to any song, but you're not sure where to start? Well, in this lesson, I'm going to show you 5 of my favorite passing chord techniques, starting from the beginner level and working all the way up to the advanced level. All right, we're going to use a tune that you're probably very familiar with. This is Let It Be by the Beatles. So the chords are very simple in this. You have C major, G major, A minor, F major, C major, G major, and then you have this little walk down, okay, which is like F major, C over E, and then what's called D minor 7, and then a C major. So this is a great example of a tune that many piano players would play like this. And they'd sort of chord the whole time, but they're not adding any interesting chords to the arrangement. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. I'm going to show you 5 different passing chord techniques, and these are chords that you can add to your chord progression to make it sound so much more interesting. But before we do this, if you're enjoying the lesson, please hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. All right, the first passing chord technique is definitely more of a beginner technique, but it sounds awesome. I'll play it for you and then break it down. So what I'm doing here is, instead of just sitting on my chord like C major, G major, I'm creating some motion on top of each of my chords using the 6th technique, okay? So here's the basic idea. You have a chord like C, you're sitting on it. Well, you could take your C chord like this and work these 6ths up and down the piano using the notes of the C major scale, okay? Now, I call this technique a pedal point 6th technique because we're sitting on a C at the bottom. That's called a pedal point. And then on the top, we have these 6ths moving. So you can practice this, right, on the C. You could also take it up here and do it like this. And then you can do this on other chords like A minor, right? Take your A minor like this, and just do a little 6, right? You could do little patterns, or you could do it like this. And once again, I'm using the notes from the C major scale to create these chords. Now, I want to briefly mention the names of each of these passing chords that you're playing, because when you take your C chord and you walk it up, you actually end up with kind of an F major passing chord. And then when you play this, you end up with a C major 7 passing chord. And so you get all these beautiful colors. Same on the A minor chord. When you start here, and let's say you come up to here, you get like a D minor over A. And this is an A minor 7, right? You get all these really interesting chords by playing these 6ths. So let's go back to Let It Be, and I'll show you how I use this technique on the chords. So we have C, we're gonna go 6th from here, walk it down. Now to the G, we're gonna land here, 6th here, walk it up and down. Very simple, okay? A minor, we're gonna start here, let's take it up and down. Super beautiful. And then on the F, we're gonna land here and then 6th, we take it up and down, okay? Back to C, same thing as before, walk it down. The G, same thing. And then on the F, same thing that we did at the beginning. F, C over E, D minor 7, C. So it's a very simple technique. It's not hard to understand, and it works very well on this tune, Let It Be. I encourage you to try it on some other tunes. Leave a comment if you think of other tunes that you can use this technique on. All right, level 2 is what I call the lift in diminished technique. Here's how it sounds. Now, this is a super hip technique that you can use anytime you want to target a chord, but you want to play a very interesting chord just before it. I love this sound. So here's basically what I'm doing. Let's say you want to go to a chord like an A minor, okay? What chord could I add in front of this chord as a passing chord? Well, you can use this lift in diminished chord, and here's how it works. Basically, you take your chord, in this case an A minor, and you go down a half step. This is going to be G sharp, and you're going to play a diminished 7th chord. This is basically all minor intervals for this chord. And so I can use this diminished 7th chord before an A minor as the target chord, meaning this chord lifts in to the A minor. It usually sounds really good in front of the A minor. Same with a chord like D minor. Let's say you want to go to D minor. Well, go down a half step to the C sharp and play a C sharp diminished 7 chord. And so for this one, you could play your C sharp diminished like this, and that leads you really nicely into a D minor. So going back to the original chord progression, I have C, G, and then I need to get to the A minor. So we're going to add that G sharp diminished 7th chord, and I'm going to play the chord like this. I kind of like this voicing. And then for the A minor, I'm going to add a little rub. I'm going to make this a little minor 2. And then to get to the F, that's my next chord, I'm going to put a little E diminished 7, right? There's the chord, kind of spreading it out. And then for the F, I'm going to make it a little jazzy. I'm going to add a little 6 to this chord, okay? And then we're going to go to a C chord, but I'm going to do one more interesting thing. I'm going to make this a C over G, so it's an inverted C chord, and I'm going to use that lift and diminished to get into this C over G chord like that, okay? And then we'll go to our G chord, and we'll end it. And I did also make this a little more jazzy. I made this like an F major 7 chord, E minor 7 chord, and I just walk it down to my C chord, and I also make this a C major 7 chord. By the way, you can download and print the lesson sheet music. You can also change the key of this entire lesson with a click of one button with our smart sheet music. So I'll put a link to all of that below. All right, level 3 is what I call the secondary dominant technique, and it sounds like this. So this is a very hip sound. It gets you some jazzier sounding chords, but they're not very hard to play. So here's the basic concept behind this passing chord technique is, let's say you're targeting like a D minor and you want to add some cool passing chords before it. Well, you can use the secondary dominant chord, which is an A7 chord. This is an A dominant 7 chord, and the reason that this leads to a D minor is because you get this little tritone interval that really wants to resolve to these 2 notes of the D minor chord. So the way to find your secondary dominant is you take your target chord, like D minor, and you go to the 5th, that's the A, and you build a dominant 7 chord on this note, okay? And you can do this for any chord, like let's say you're targeting your A minor and you want to add a passing chord in front of it. Well, go to the 5th, the E, and play an E7 chord like this, and now you could play an E7 like that, right? I'm just changing the order of notes and going to my A minor chord. And so you can do this on all of the chords. So if we go back to Let It Be, I'm going to start on a C major 7 chord. I'm kind of jazzing up this chord. Instead of just an ordinary C major, I add a 7th there. And then I go to my 5 chord G, and then here's the magic. Okay, this is the secondary dominant chord. It's an E7, okay, but I'm kind of spreading the notes out, and then I'm also adding one more cool jazzy note called the flat 13. But you don't have to worry about these extra notes right now. I just want you to understand the general concept behind the chord that we're adding, okay? Then A minor 7, there's my A minor 7. I'm kind of jazzing it up, I'm adding the G to it. And then, instead of just going to F, the 4 chord, I'm gonna go, ooh, super cool. There's that secondary dominant. It's a C7. This leads you to an F, but I'm jazzing it up, right? I'm putting the D on the top, that's a chord extension. And then there's the F, and then we can go back to our C major chord, right? G, that's our 5 chord, and then you could do another secondary dominant, that's the C7, which leads us to the final chords for the walk down. All right, before I teach you level 4, if you want to do a deep dive and really understand how to add chords to your chord progressions, I recommend that you check out our courses, Passing Chords and Reharmonization. You're looking here at our beginner to intermediate level course, where we go into way more detail about each of these chords and the different types of passing chords, including how to use chord relatives, secondary dominant passing chords, lower neighbor diminished chords, and I show you how to use these techniques on a variety of chord progressions. We also have our intermediate to advanced level course where I show you even more techniques using tritones, 2-5-1s, elongated passing chords, chromatic passing chords, and I answer your top questions at the end of each course, so I'll put a link to both courses below. All right, passing chord technique number 4 is what I call the tritone substitution approach, and here's how it sounds. All right, this technique is super cool and hip. It gives you some really nice jazzy colors to your chords, but it's also not that hard to play. So the way that this works is that you're gonna take those secondary dominant chords that I taught you earlier, but you're gonna substitute those chords for what's called the tritone substitution. So here's what I mean. Let's say you're going to an A minor chord, right? This is your target chord, and I said earlier you can use the secondary dominant to get to that chord. So I could use an E7 to get to my A minor. Well, with tritone substitution, you're gonna take a substitute chord for the E7 and use it instead. And so the way that you do this is you start on your E and you go up 3 whole steps. 1, 2, 3, and you're gonna play a dominant 7 chord on this note. So we're gonna play a B flat dominant 7 chord, and this becomes the new chord that we play just before our target chord of A minor. And it's very common for jazz musicians to add a 7th to this chord as well. So they'll go like B flat 7 to an A minor 7. And so you can do this in front of any chord. Like let's say you're going to your F chord, right? Like this. Well, I said earlier that you could play a C7 like that in front of the F. Well, what's the tritone sub of a C7? Let's go up 3 whole steps. 1, 2, 3. It's a G flat 7. So we're gonna play a G flat 7 like this, and then we're gonna land on our F chord, but again, we're gonna jazz it up a little bit and turn it into an F major 7. So let's go back to Let It Be, and I'll show you how I use these chords. So we start on a C, we're gonna go G, and then here's the magic. Ooh, very cool. This is that B flat 7 chord, but I'm adding some additional notes to the chord. So a B flat 7 would normally be like this. I'm spreading the notes out, but I'm adding a C and a G, which are called chord extensions. So it's a B flat 7, but I'm adding some extra jazzy notes to color the chord. Then we end on our A minor, but I'm gonna add some jazzy notes here. I'm gonna turn this into an A minor 7, and I'm also adding a 9 in here to color it. And then we're gonna go beautiful G flat 7 chord. This leads us to our F chord, but I'm adding some notes. So normally a G flat 7 would be like that. I'm gonna spread the notes out, and I'm adding a 9, and then I'm also adding what's called a flat 13. But don't worry about these 9s and flat 13s if you're new to the piano. I just want you to understand the basic concept that it's a dominant 7 chord, and that drops in to the F major chord. Again, I'm adding some notes to color it, the G and the E. And then let's look at our next phrase. Super cool, okay? So we're starting on that C chord. Remember, we went to our G chord after this, but I'm gonna use that tritone substitute. We're gonna go up a half step to that lead-in chord. This is an A flat 7, but I'm adding some notes. I'm adding a B flat and an F, the 9 and the 13, and I'm clustering it together. So we have C, A flat, to my G chord. I'm also gonna jazz this chord up. I'm gonna make it a G7, and I'm adding the 9 and the 13 to this chord. Again, you could think of it as just a normal G chord with some extra notes added. And then we're gonna go to our F, but I'm gonna use the tritone substitute. Again, adding some jazzy notes to it. And then we end our phrase, F major 7, C over E, D minor 7, and then the C chord. All right, technique number 5 is what I call the Moo Magic technique, and here's how it goes. All right, this is one of my all-time favorite passing chord techniques, and the way that this works is, let's say you're targeting a chord like your A minor, right? And you want to add some passing chords in front of it. Well, you can use this Moo Magic chord, which has a very cool, hip, contemporary, kind of jazzy sound to it. And the chord that I'm using is this chord. And you might be thinking, Johnny, what the heck is this chord? Well, it's actually just an E with an add 2. So think of like an E major, you're adding a 2 to it, but you're gonna drop the 3rd down to the bottom and you're gonna play it down here, okay? And then I'm just taking these 3 notes and I'm spreading them out like this, okay? So it's an E add 2 over G sharp, and it sounds gorgeous in front of an A minor. And so the way to figure out your Moo Magic chord is you take your target chord, in this case it's an A minor, you go up to the 5th, the E, and this becomes the root of your Moo Magic chord, right? And now you can lead up to your A minor. You can do the same thing for D minor. Let's say you're targeting a D minor, you want to add some passing chords in front of it. Well, go up to the 5th, that's the A, and play the A, add 2, and put the 3rd on the bottom, and now you have this leading into this. So let's go back to Let It Be. We're starting on a C chord, but we're gonna do an add 2. You hear that? Okay. Next chord, we're gonna go to our G chord, right? That's the 2nd chord in Let It Be, but we're gonna use that Moo Magic, okay? So what's the Moo Magic? It's a D, add 2 over the 3rd, and we're gonna voice it like this. Really pretty. So we have to our G chord, I'm doing a G add 2, so I'm putting the add 2 on the bottom, and then now we're going to go to our A minor chord, so I'm going to use the Moo Magic, that's the E add 2 over G sharp, and that leads us to A minor. Okay, beautiful A minor chord. Notice I'm adding a D to this chord, turning it into what's called an A minor 11, and you can actually just think of this chord as a C sus2 or C add 2 over an A. Okay, that's kind of the chord shape. And then we're going to go to our F chord. Well, let's use our C add 2 over E. Okay, and this leads us to a beautiful F add 2. Okay, and then I love this one. Okay, this is an F add 2 over A flat. Okay, so it really works well with this Moo Magic sound. And then C over G. And then we're going to go back to the F add 2 over A flat. Again, we're using the 3rd in the bass. And then C add 2 over G. It's an inversion. And then I love this chord. It's called a G9 sus4. So there's your G9 with the sus4. And then we have a little walk up, okay? So these are those Moo chords again. It's an F add 2 over A. I'm just gonna walk this up to a G add 2, like this. You see that beautiful chord? And this leads you back into your C chord. And of course, we're gonna do a C add 2, and I put a little button on the end. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the lesson, please let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out pianowithjohnny.com. We have a ton of step-by-step lessons and courses for all playing levels, an awesome community, live learning events. It's a ton of fun, so be sure to check it out, and I'll see you in the next one.